Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm still out doing a scout. I'm in the middle of a national forest, really kind of enjoying myself. Went down a couple of rabbit holes, almost got caught, but it wasn't that bad. It was kind of fun. I just went down this trail until I couldn't go anymore and then had a little trouble turning around, but life's an adventure, right? And so really what I wanted to talk about today, and I'm not sure where I'm going to publish this yet. I may put it on my private channel or I may put it on public, but I want to talk about the Viking radio network and really what that means and what that is and what we're trying to do with the Viking radio network. First let's talk about what it is and what's the idea behind it. One is that we need to establish communications between Viking groups. In other words, if there are 3 groups in the state of Georgia and they're pretty far apart, those groups need to communicate with each other so that they can provide mutual assistance. And really what we're talking about is what happens if there's no cell phone, there's no internet, the zombie apocalypse, so to speak. And so we should have a backup plan, using the PACE acronym, that having a radio backup or some form of backup would be somewhere between contingency and emergency. And so you should have a backup plan. And what I'm trying to do is find enough amateur radio operators that we could establish links in case you have to fall back to the contingency portion of your communications plan. So one of the things that Viking Radio Network, or VRN, is establishing amateur radio operators, preferably with HF capability, that can communicate with other groups. And so that is one of the things we're trying to do. In other words, ideally that we'd have a network large enough that not only will we be able to communicate between groups in the same state, but between groups in other states or neighboring states. A person with a decent HF station can easily cover 3 or 4 states. And so if we establish that network, we would be able to pass information from one group to another. And where that may come in handy is, we'll take Florida for example. When they have a bad hurricane heading their way, they evacuate and the different groups can communicate what they're doing, and we, living outside of that affected area, can assist our fellow Vikings in either traveling through or finding a place to stay amongst other Vikings. Also too, it may be an opportunity to pass information, intelligence as it were, going back and forth. So that's one of the goals of the Viking Radio Network. It's not it's not a secret decoder ring organization. It's just there to put something in place so that your group can talk to at least one other group, or maybe 2 or 3 other groups, and that's to provide mutual assistance to one another. The second reason for the Viking Radio Network is to help hook up amateur radio operators that are Vikings who don't have a group, to help them find a group. Hopefully every group is actively looking for a ham radio operator to be a communicator for their team. And so at least somebody hopefully with HF capability, and that would mean somebody with either a general class or an extra class license. So the second goal of the amateur radio network, or the Viking radio network, is to help hams and Viking groups come together to be part of it, be a part of the team. Falling back to the first goal, which is having Viking groups being able to communicate with one another. Okay, so that's really what VRN, or Viking Radio Network, really is. It's those two goals in mind. Now, what we are not is, we are not necessarily a training organization. Hopefully the ham, you as a ham, or a group with a ham, that they are fairly proficient in their craft. If not, they need to step up a little bit. Like I said, in order for the network to really work, everybody has to have HF capability as far as VRN is concerned. Let me pause here and saying that VRN is not for intra-group communications. In other words, how you establish communications within your group is up to the group, because each group will be different depending on what they have, what they want to use, what their level of training is. If you have a Viking group that is composed of nothing but ham radio operators, their form or means of communication might be very different than a group who has no ham radio operators, or maybe just one. And that's mainly because of licensing and what radios they can use, what radios they are willing to purchase. So when it comes to intra-group, in other words, communications within your group, that is up to the individual group. With VRN, we will probably establish some minimum protocols to use to communicate. And you have to do that because there are many different ways to communicate between groups. There's voice, there's digital, there's Morse code or CW, there's satellite, there's the different frequencies. There's 80 meters, 40 meters, 20 meters, 50 meters, 10. Not counting, things like CB and then the other stuff. So really what we want to do is establish a couple basic protocols where we can sit there and say, if things go really bad, this is where you go to find other Viking hams. Because with amateur radio, especially with the HF frequencies, there are no channels. We can't say go to channel 3 because there is no channel 3. What it is, it may be a frequency. 3.810, 3.815, 3.820. I mean, and ad infinitum, ad nauseum. And so by establishing a couple basic protocols, we can establish, we'll meet somewhere around this frequency, somewhere around this time. If you want to talk to somebody, or if you want to listen between this time and this time on this frequency. It gives us a baseline. The same thing with digital communications. There's lots and lots of different ways of using digital. There are lots of different what they call modes, and one mode can't necessarily understand another mode. So if everybody is going somewhere looking to talk to somebody else and everybody's on their own mode, then not everybody will be hooked up. Whereas if we establish a base protocol saying, you know, to at least meet up, you need to get on this frequency using this digital mode and during this time. Pretty simple. And we'll establish that, you know, once I get more people, you know, signed on to the program. You know, really, we are not a training group. We probably won't be a training group. You know, I can help some people sometimes, but if a lot of us are far away, there's other ways to get training. One way to get amateur radio training is to join your local amateur radio club. Every town typically has 2 or more. So find your nearest amateur radio group, join that club, get started, learn what they do. And I'm sure somebody, at least somebody in that club, will help you get started to where you can participate with VRN. You know, because VRN is over the whole nation, it's not like it's a club in one city. And so that's one way that you can get help. Another really good source is Amron, and that's AMRRON, and I'll post that above here. And join Amron and get their training. They have probably some of the best training out there right now, and they're a good group to associate with anyhow, because they are primarily an emergency communications group. So I would suggest, you know, if I were king, I would suggest that everybody that wants to be a Viking ham radio operator join Amron and get their training. They have lots of good online training, and become a member of Amron, because not only do they teach you how to use this stuff, but they have lots of nets and lots of drills so that you can continue to hone your skills. You know, ham radio is not something that you turn on the radio once, say hello, and then turn it off. Lots of things happen between sometimes the first time you talk and the next time you talk. It's a skill that has to be constantly honed, and Amron is a good place to learn that. So that's really VRN in a nutshell. It's not going to be an overly close, you know, highly trained group. You know, the training will depend on you, and it'll depend on what you want to do as far as being trained. And so I recommend you get training. We'll put up the protocols, whatever we end up determining them to be. You learn those protocols, and then we'll set up, you know, times and frequencies where you can use these protocols, and when something bad happens, you'll be able to go and find out that information. All right. Let's talk about OPSEC. And the first thing I want to say is, if you're not doing anything illegal, then why are you worried about OPSEC? You know, I talk on ham radio every week. I run nets. I'm on nets. You know, my information's out there. You know, if you want to be proficient in your craft, then you have to practice it. And the amateur radio service, it is a service and not a hobby, was put there by the government to provide emergency communications. And so all you're doing is you are exercising your privilege to communicate with others in a time of need. And that's really all I have to say about it. I mean, you know, go out there, learn your craft, apply your craft, and do your craft, because, you know, the majority of people out there do not know how to use radios because they've never been in a situation when the only thing they had was a radio. And during an emergency or during a time of crisis is not the time to learn, because it takes skill to do this. It's not just push a button and talk. It's almost a whole language unto itself. So that's all I got. I'm enjoying the scenery. I'm traveling down a gravel road in the national park, just enjoying life, and probably gonna start heading back to the house. Obi's had enough. He's ready to go home and eat. So you all take care and be safe out there. Be secure. We'll see you.